All right, take two. Just kicking off from where we were at the end of that first lesson, and we're just showing what the code is to actually place a trade. I was just what I didn't do at the end of the last lesson was, that all compiles properly now. It's got no errors, but there are two warnings. We'll go through what they are exactly, but they're not warnings aren't necessarily something that you have to worry about depending on what they are. Like for this one here, for example, the value of order send should be checked. So what that is you've told it to place an order, but you should have a double check in there to make sure it actually does place the order, and if it doesn't, to return whatever the error was. So that's all that is. And with this sort of basic coding that we have here at the moment, it's really not going to be a problem. It's never going to not place a trade, really. And later on, when you get more complicated, usually the trades are sort of in a bit of a loop. So if it doesn't place a trade, it's just going to run that same code again on the next tick, and no doubt it would place it then anyway. But this symbol up here takes it back to the MT4 platform, and we've got that EA selected there and a time period to set it. Doesn't really matter too much for what we're doing. Expert properties. At the moment, there isn't anything. You can just set the deposit amount that you want to play with. We don't worry about the optimization at this stage, but this is where you would find any user inputs if we put some in, which we're about to do. But if we run that code now, and press go, it's just going to continually put trades in place and until, well, we've just blown $10,000 because it was just every single tick it was placing a trade. And the reason it does that is because this section of the code, the on tick section, it's just going to run this code every tick of information that comes through, and that's multiple times every second. So it's just placing trade. So the very simplest way, I think, to avoid it placing too many trades is to use one of the most common little codes that gets used in, pretty much every facet of coding, and that's a statement called if. And so we're just going to come up with a bit of code that's going to say, if something's true, then it will place that order send order. If it's not true, then it won't. So what we're doing now is going to go through, this is another code called orders total, and that's one of the MQL4 codes, and that's going to return how many current orders are in place. So how many trades are already opened. So we'll just put if it's less than one. So if there's less than one trade open, we want it to place a trade. And with the if statement, anything you wanted to do if this is true, we just need to put in these curly brackets. You can also put the curly bracket on the same line before and after. It just depends on how you like to set your code out. And that'll all become more important once you've created a more elaborate EA, and then you need to have some good coding practices in place so that you know exactly what each section of code does. Otherwise, it can look completely confusing. And like a lot of my EAs have, over 800 lines of code. So if you want to come and add or fix or adjust one little section of it, if you don't have it nicely laid out, it's going to take quite a while to find exactly what you're looking for. And especially the way I started creating EAs was to learn a little bit and then just keep adding little bits on as I learned more and as I had ideas for it. And so now and again, I've got to go through and reorganize my code so that it's in a more logical sort of sequence that I can find and understand easily. So now what it should do now is if there's no trades open, it'll open a trade. As it comes through here, the first time it runs it, there'll be no trades open, so that'll be less than one. So it'll open an order, and then it'll get to the end of the on tick section, and it'll go and run it again. But now there will be one trade open, which isn't less than one, so it won't do this. So like we went through last lesson, you've got some info up the top. You can put in some variables there that are sort of always true. And then we've got 3 other sections on in it. So that's just on the initialization section. So that code will just run once the EA is added to the chart, and then this section will never run again. And likewise with the on deinitialization is when you take the EA off the chart, it's going to run this code once, just right at the end. And the on tick section, it just gets run constantly all the time, over and over and over again. So once you change code, you have to compile it for 2 reasons. 1, to make sure there's no errors, and 2, that saves a separate file that is the execution file. So at the moment, we're just looking at the source code. Once you compile it, it'll save that in another file, which will be the execution file, which is what you incorporate into your MT4 platform in order to have an EA there to use. So back to the MT4, in the experts list, we have this one called coding course, and that's the execution file that you would drag onto the chart to use it. And as you can see, Aaron, I've got all your bits of code in there as well to play with. Because I'm sure at some stage when there's people on lessons, they're going to ask about your code. So we've got it there to talk about at some stage. And that'll be good as well, because we've got that code. And then I think a big part of not coding, but of creating an EA is the back testing. And we've got code there to play with and show people what different parameters, how they make, just changing things, simple things like stop loss and take profits can make a big difference to the overall profitability of an EA. Anyway, let's run that same EA again. And this time it should only take out 1 trade and then stop. Oops, we're going too fast. But it took out that 1 trade only. And that's all it's going to do. And this trade will never close because we don't have a take profit or a stop loss in place. So that'll just keep going until it loses $10,000, and then that'll stop. And so that brings us on to the next section. We're going to go through stop losses and take profits. There's one other thing I wanted to touch on as well. So you've got all the sections of the code and then the void on tick section. And so all of these sections, they're enclosed with those curly brackets. So everything that you want to happen on initialization that code has to go here in between these 2 curly brackets. Same with void on tick. All of your code has to be between 2 curly brackets. Even though we've got more curly brackets for the if statements, the whole on tick section needs to be enclosed in the curly brackets. So essentially, after this last curly bracket here, this is the end of the code, so to speak. We will be putting more coding down here as well, but that'll just get called on the on tick section. So you can come up with, and that's what you're talking about before, Aaron, about having the extra voids down here. You can create, these are standard parts of an EA that on tick, but you can create your own, and then you can call on those functions from within the on tick section. So I generally have, and I don't just have an order send. We'll probably have time to go through that in a minute. I'll have a separate function down here that's a void, just down here, doesn't matter where it is, as long as it's not in these functions. And that'll be all the code for more complex order placement. And then I might call that just place buy order. And then instead of having the actual code here to place a buy order, I'll just call on that extra void function and just type in place buy order, and it will see that it needs to do that. It'll find where that code is and it'll run that code and then come back to the on tick. But as we went through before, we've got the chart symbol that we want to place the trade on. We want it to be a buy order of a 0.1 lot size. And because it's a buy order, we want it to place it at the current ask price as opposed to the bid price. We're giving it 3 points of slippage in case the market moves a lot. And if it's higher than that, it won't place the trade. And the 2 zeros are for stop loss and take profit. Now, the value that it wants here is a market value of the particular instrument that you're trading. So if we come back to here, it wants the price of Great British Pound against the US dollar. So my point is it wants something like 1.05, 1.205. So if we put that in for a stop loss instead of 1.205, then when we run the code, you can see that it's placed a stop loss as well. Now in code, we are generally in an EA sort of thing when we're creating a stop loss. A lot of the time we'll just want to place a stop loss a certain number of pips or points away from the trade. Not always, but a lot of the time, you'll want to have, let's say 100 point stop loss and a 200 point take profit or something like that. But the actual order send function wants a dollar value. So depending on how your EA works, it might create a value that is a dollar value. But other than that, we might want to, so instead of that, let's say we want to put in a stop loss 100 points away from the trade. How we would do that is we'd call on the ask price. And so this is a code word that just brings in the current ask price of that instrument. So we're going to say ask minus, because it's a buy order, we want the stop loss to be 100 points lower. So that's minus. So ask minus 100. And to make that actually, so at the moment, that would be 1.2 minus 100, which would be wrong. So we need to put a little bit more code in to make sure it knows that 100 we're talking about is actual points. And to do that, we've got to multiply it by underscore point. So now it'll know that that's an actual, because we've multiplied it by what that point is, which is different for every instrument, really. So now it's when we run it, if we compile it and it all looks good, when we run it, it should now place it 100 points below. I know this is probably all really a bit too basic for you, Aaron, but I know there's some guys that are going to struggle with even this, so we need to aggressively move in. Oops. So what happened? It actually hit the stop loss and then opened up a new trade. But if we come here and we measure from the trade down to the stop loss line, we can see there it says 100. So that middle number. And just so everyone knows what that is, so you've got those three numbers. You've got 0, /111, /1.2058. So the 0 is how many candles away from the starting point of our cursor. So if we're straight below, it's 0. The 103 is the number of points. from where we started that cursor. And then the 1.2 is obviously the dollar value associated with here. So that's how we make it, put a stop loss at a distance, a set point distance away from the trade. Back to the meta editor. If you've got any, you probably don't have too many questions about this, Aaron, but if you've got any good ideas or things you'd like to say that might help you guys out, speak up, because I don't really want these lessons to just be me talking and everyone listening, because otherwise it might as well just be a recorded sort of a lesson. Plus, if we all sort of throw ideas around together, we're bound to come up with something a little better. And then this second zero is where we want to put the take profit. So instead of being minus, we need to make it plus so that it's above the trade. So now it should place a stop loss 100 points below, which is 10 pips. It's 10 points to every pip. And then the stop loss, the take profit should be 200 points above the trade. And this last little bit, CLR green, it's just placing an arrow where that trade was taken out, and it's doing it in a green color. And we'll just run that. And so we have the stop loss and the take profit. And we know it's going to hit the stop loss, and then it's just opened up a new one because there's no trades. And so that's all working as we would have expected to. Okay, the next little bit I wanted to go through was normally I didn't realize you'd even left the call, Aaron.
Yeah, internet dropped out, sorry.
Yeah, I didn't even know you'd gone until you tried to get back in. Probably, yeah, it hasn't been anything too technical for you, just some basic stuff for the new people to coding. But what I did say that you might have missed out on was that if you've got anything you want to say it, because, I don't want it to just be me talking and people listening. I want it to be a sort of a more interactive lesson so that everybody understands. And because you know a bit about coding already, you probably have some good, helpful advice for everyone anyway. But all we've done so far is put in a stop loss and a take profit. But a lot of the time, things like take profits and stop losses, you're going to want them to be an input that the user of the EA can select. So what we're going to do is do that now. And we do that right up the top here, above the on init section. And if it's something that you want the user to be able to change, like in the EA settings, you can put input. There is another code that does exactly the same called extern, EXTERN, extern as in external. They both do exactly the same thing. I think input's just a newer one, so that's what I'm using. So you put input so that it's going to be something that the user can change in the EA settings. And so for now, we're going to want a stop loss, and we're going to give it a value like we just did of 100. And most lines of code, especially this type, not all lines of code, but the majority of lines of code need to end in a semicolon just so that it knows that section's done. Now that code itself won't be right at the moment. There's one more little thing you need to enter in here, and INT for integer. If the value, in this case, if the value of stop loss is going to be a whole number, you can call it an integer, so int. There's a few different ones that we'll go through, but input, if the value of the whatever you're setting here is going to be have a decimal place in it, then you need to call it a double instead of an int. And our take profit's only going to be a whole number as well, but just to show you, you would do that. I mean, I would call it an integer anyway, but just to show you can do double, and then you could set it at 200.1 then, because it's a double. There are a few other things. I'm going to change this one back to int though. There are a few other options besides integer and double. Another one is string. If the value of this was going to be a word, then you would put string in here instead of int. So string just refers to letters, not just letters, but various characters and printed words. Another one is bool. This will return either true or false. And we probably won't go in that today, but a lot of the code will use bool, and that just means instead of having a dollar value or a numerical value or a word value as in string, this one will just return a value of either true or false, nothing else. And I probably didn't mention it, but if you put double backslash at the start of the line, then anything you type here is not going to be part of the code. So, if you wanted to just put some notes here to help you understand what's going on, you could do it like that. So anything after a double backslash isn't part of the code, and that's just how you could add some notes to understand what's going on. So these values we've set, they are now highlighted in red because we've set them as a user input. If we come back down here to our order send, instead of putting that in as our stop loss, we can now just put in stop loss. And because it's highlighted red as well. So that's just important so you know you've got no typos. If I had a capital S there, it wouldn't be highlighted because the actual user input is lowercase. And same for the take profit. We'll delete that and just put in take profit. Profit. So that should compile, no worries now. And if we run that now, it's going to do exactly the same thing as before. But we now have in the expert properties, this is just a strategy tester. If you click on expert properties, it's exactly the same as either clicking on the smiley face of the EA or going into the expert properties through the menu. But now we have these input values. So we can change the stop loss value. Oops. I just realized I did something silly. What did I do? Stop loss, take profit. I'm not sure what I've done there. Get rid of everything so it's not confusing. Now I've confused myself. I'm not sure why it says set stop loss value. All right. And that's the tricky thing. Sometimes if you just have one little thing wrong, like I had only one backslash in one position there, which was making it change it instead of two. So if I have two after double backslash, we should be fine. And when we go to here, not fine. Anyway, we'll sort that out. Doesn't matter. We'll compile it without those comments. And now we can change those values ourselves to whatever we want. And then run the code. And it didn't place a trade. I guess having issues while we're making the video is good. Let's just try and sort out what the problem was. I don't know what the issue was. We still need to have ask minus stop loss in there and ask plus take profit, because we have to tell it to put the stop loss below the ask price of that trade and the take profit above the ask price of that trade. And we'll just run that this time. Still no trade. Come back to here. And we will still need to put times underscore point so that it knows that that stop loss value is actually points. And a lot of the time coding can be just like this. It doesn't do what you want it to do. So you've got to go and see what was wrong and fix it or adjust it. And look at that. At last we got our trade, and we've got the stop loss at 200 points, the take profit at 300. And we can change that to much closer values and change them however we want, and just keep testing that EA until it makes us money. Now we can see they're much closer now. All right. So that's the user input side of things. Another user input that you would most likely have in most EAs would also be input, and this time it will have to be a double. because we're going to call it the lot size. And generally, when I'm setting a lot size initial value in an EA, I set it at the very smallest lot size possible. That way, you know, someone forgets to, if I had it at a 10 lot size and somebody didn't adjust it, the default settings is going to place a huge trade on people. So you can see now why we need a double for that one. And then we'll just come down here to where we had that lot size of 0.1, and we'll just type in lot size instead and compile it. And so this time it should place a 0.01 lot size, which it did. And then we could change the lot size whenever we wanted to whatever size we wanted. And the EA would automatically do what the user inputted. Larger trade this time. All right, so if statements also have sort of a companion code, which is called else. So it's basically like if there's less than one trade open, it's going to place that trade. Else, and then we can give it something to do. If so if it's there's less than one trade open, it's going to do this. Otherwise, or else, it's going to do this. And we might just put, and this will give you another little code word comment, and then just in brackets and quotes, we're going to get it to print max trades reached. And finish it off with a curly bracket. So now it's going to place a trade if there's less than one. But then when it runs this code the next time and there's already one trade open, it's not going to be able to do that. So it's going to do the else. So it will comment max trades reached. Let's see if I get it right this time. And it does it really quickly though. So it's placed one trade, but now it's the second time it ran that code, it printed max trades reached. So that's how the else statement. Else doesn't work on its own. It's part of the if statement. So you can use if on its own, or you can use if and else together. All right. So I know some of you guys have probably already, copied code off YouTube guys and got it working and started playing around that way, which is exactly what I did when I started. Even though I didn't really understand why that code did what it did, I was still able to copy and with a bit of experimentation get it to work. And then with trial and error and adjusting that code and incorporating various different codes together, I just started to learn exactly what they all meant. So I'm self-taught, plus, not self-taught, but YouTube taught. There are various people that I learned off, but then I sort of, took it the next step and made those different coding techniques and coding sections of code work together. Just like Aaron did with up here, he's got a code here that uses Bollinger Bands to give a signal, or either a buy or sell signal, and then there's another one that does the same using the MACD indicator, so that it gives either a buy or sell signal. And then he's got another separate piece of code here which incorporates. Now that I've started talking about this, so he's got two pieces of code. This one gets a buy or sell signal using Bollinger Band indicator. This one gets a signal from the MACD indicator, and then this one actually puts them all together. And it does that by this include function. So he's got hash include check entry Bollinger. So it's adding, all include does, it's actually adding all of this code here. It's adding that to this EA. It's going to put all that code in right there, and then it's going to put all of this code below that, and then it's got its own. So that's just a nice, neat way of doing it. You could also just, come here. You could copy all of that code and paste it in here and do the same with the other one. That would work exactly the same. So that's what I was getting at. We've got two separate bits of code here, and then we've got a third code here that's actually putting them all together to actually create an EA that places trades. Just a little bit of code I prepared here earlier so that I didn't have to type it all in. So now, if this is another way that if statements work and that you can use it to, so like at the moment, it's going to place a trade, and the only criteria required is that there's no current open trades. Obviously, that's not enough criteria to be a profitable trading strategy. But if we add in another criteria here, which I'll do in a minute, so when we're talking about the Bollinger Bands and the MACD up here, another common indicator is the RSI, the relative strength index. And so any of the indicators that come with the MT4 platform, I think all of them, at least most of them, there is code built into MQL4 to allow you to pull in information from that particular indicator. And I'm not going to use these ones up here because they're a little bit more complete and therefore complex code. But if you wanted to use the RSI value as part of your EA, this is the code for it, RSI, and then similar to placing orders and that, we want to get the RSI value. This is going to return the current RSI value of the symbol. So in this case, whatever chart you have it on, whatever time period you have it. So you can select the time period, or you could just, if you've just got underscore period, it's just going to use whatever time frame you have the chart on. You could change that to the 1 hour time frame so that no matter what time frame you have the chart on, it's going to pull in this information based off the 1 hour time frame. But just for now, we'll leave it at that. So whatever time frame we have the chart on, that's going to be the relative strength index, the RSI value of the last 14 candles, which is the stock standard for RSI. And so we've got the open price. So it's going to give us the value, the RSI value of when that candle opened. You can also have the when it closes, or the highest value it reached, or the lowest value it reached. So we're just going to go with open. And this 0 here, it just denotes the current candle. And what I mean by that is at the moment, this candle here has a designation of 0. This one would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You get the idea. So I can find out the RSI value of the current candle, or I could type in 20 and get the RSI values of this candle. So we don't just have to look at the current market. We can look at historical values of any of the candles we like. So that's it. So what I've done here is and because the RSI value isn't just a whole number, I've called it double. and I'm assigning that to the value of RSI value. So now RSI value will equal this, which will be the open price of the current candle. So that's just setting the value of RSI. That doesn't do anything as far as running the EA goes. It's just setting a value for RSI value. So now down here in our if statement, I'm going to type in here RSI value is less than 30. Let's make it 40 just so that it's actually going to activate quickly for us and we don't have to wait too long. So now, instead of just opening up a trade simply because there's no trades open, you're going to have no trades open plus and the RSI value of the current candle needs to be less than 40. If both of those things are true, then it will place the order. And I just don't really want that in the code at the moment. All right, so we can run that now and see how it goes. Compiles, no problem. Back to here. And so normally what I will do, just so we can see, I will just add the RSI to the chart, and I'll just save that as a template so that it uses that in the testing. So if you set up a chart however you like it, add whatever indicators you like, and then if you save it as a template called tester, then that is a template it will add to the chart when you start, so like at the moment, if I start the EA, it's going to add the RSI indicator onto it. Right, so let me just step back to our code for a moment. And compile it. Oh, I know what I did wrong. Let me just open up a new chart and add the RSI onto it. So I'm going to set the chart up how I like the chart, and then I will right click and save it as a template. Save template, the one called tester. And now when I start the EA, it'll add the RSI value to the chart as well. And it hasn't placed any trades. It's just waiting for the RSI value to get down to 40. So once it gets down to about here, it'll open up a trade. So now it's got two criteria. So, this is a better trading strategy, not a good one still, but at least it's waiting for something, which is an indicator to trigger that trade. And then, of course, we can make that a user input as well. If we change that to, we'll just give that a value there. And up here, we'll put in another user input. Now we've got another input here, setting the RSI of 30. We had it set at 40 before. So if we run the code now, kind of wait for it to, this blue line's got to get right down to this dotted line on 30 before it places a trade this time. And you know that's just a buy signal, simply because it's measuring whether the instrument's overbought or undersold. So the lower this indicator goes, the greater chance there is that the market's going to turn around and go up, at least for a while. Like most indicators, it's definitely not enough on its own to be a good trading strategy. But once you incorporate a few together, then it starts to become a more worthwhile strategy. So like before, when we had it set at 40, it took out a trade about here, but it still hasn't. There we go, and it placed a trade that time. As you can see, it went below 30, so it started placing trades, but the market kept dropping, so they were all losing trades. So that's what I mean by it's not necessarily a good strategy on its own. But we can see that it's now accurately using the RSI as an entry requirement for placing a trade. How are we going for time? We might have to call it quits here pretty soon. But I might just show you what we were talking about before about void. We can make our own little void section here called place buy order. And we would just make it pretty much this. We would make it a more, I won't today because we're sort of getting close to our hour, so I'll call it quits here for this lesson pretty soon. But we would make this more, when we will next lesson, we'll make this more complex code. So at the moment, we're getting this warning that we should check the order send. So we'll put code in here that will just double check that and print an error message if there's any issues. But for the moment, void place order, and we need to put it all inside curly brackets as well. And now instead of having all of this here, we would just put this in. And semicolon on the end. And that should compile fine. And if we run it now, this will do exactly the same thing as it was doing before. If these two things are true, it's going to place by order. And it's going to see this, and it's going to jump down here to find what that is, and it's going to do all this. Now, you might have like 20 or 30 lines of code between the curly brackets as a place by order bit of coding. So that's going to do a lot more complex things than just simply place an order. You know, it could determine whether it needs to be a buy or a sell, and work out different stop losses and take profits and place that trade accordingly. So you can have a lot of complex code here, but to call on all that complex code, all you need to do is have place by order printed in here, and it'll do all that. And why that's a better way of doing things is you might have on a fully functioning EA, you might have a lot of different criteria that could trigger a trade. So we might have this one, but we might have another one down here where you need to bounce off support and Bollinger Bands and whatever, and that could trigger a buy order. So you could have a lot of different sort of strategies or entry criteria. And instead of typing all this complex code every single time, you can just put place buy order. and it shortens the code, which means the reason you want to keep code short as far for aesthetics and usability and all of that, but also because whatever's in the on tick function is getting run multiple times every second. So if you've got too much in here, the EA is going to be working overtime just trying to run through all this code, even though it may not be doing very much, and that will slow it down as well. And we can see down here it tells us how long it takes to compile it, so which is just 0.2 of a second. If this figure was too high, it would probably mean let's say it took, we'll exaggerate, let's say it took 10 seconds to run all the code in the on tick. That would mean there's 10 seconds. So this first line of code would run, and then it's 10 seconds until it would run again. So it would only be able to, know what's going on. It's only going to know what the RSI is once every 10 seconds. Whereas you might want it to know that much more recently and updated. So you need it to be able to run this a lot quicker. And by having it just reading that all the time instead of reading all the complex code every time, it'll shorten up that run time as well. All right, guys, I'll leave it at that for now. And next lesson, we'll hopefully have plenty of people on and we'll start a bit of a discussion, not just have me talking. And I know people have put in the chat group a few ideas that they want to go through and start building an EA towards. And that's what I want to do as well. So we'll have a bit of discussion on the next lesson and talk about, answer questions and go through what people want to talk about and start thinking and actually starting to create an EA. At the moment, sure, we've got an EA, but it's not something in particular. I was just sort of explaining a few of the basic concepts of coding and EAs. And so from now on in, we'll sort of get serious towards starting to put something together. And the way I see that probably playing out is we'll probably create an EA together, and you can copy that onto your own MT4, or I can just probably send you the file to make it a bit easier. Although sometimes copying it out is very handy for new people learning to code so that they can see, when I first did it, and I think I was a lot worse than Aaron was, but he's got some practice. I copied the code from a lot of those videos that you did, Aaron, and it took me, after I'd copied it as perfectly as I could, it took me a long time to troubleshoot all the little errors I'd made before I could even compile it. And a lot of the issues were me missing a little semicolon. Like that code compiles perfectly there. If I just remove one semicolon, I've just got one error. But if you've got more complex code and you just remove one semicolon, that could give you like 20 errors because it just gets confused about what's going on, because that semicolon denotes the fact that that bit of code is finished and now you're going to give it something else to do. If you don't tell it it's finished, it thinks this is all one operation, and which makes no sense to it. So you get a lot of errors. All right, guys, anything you want to say to finish this lesson off, Aaron?
No, just one thing quickly while it's fresh on my mind. With the underscore period, could you give us an example if it was just for the 4-hour chart for the RSI value?
All right. Let's let the help setting do it for us, because this is a very handy little set. So if you highlight that code and we go up to help and click MQL4 reference, it's going to tell us the parameters that we can put into it. If we come down to the time frame one, which is the second one, say time frame down to here, and we click on where it says enum timeframes, it gives us all the different ones. So we could have period current, which is the same as just having underscore period. That's the same. Or you could do period underscore M1, M5, M15. So if you wanted the 4-hour period, and you don't even have to type it in, because now we can just copy and paste it. We could get rid of that and put that in. And that should compile. That makes it pretty handy, doesn't it, Aaron?
Yeah, that's nice and easy. Yeah,
And
thank you.
that's the the same for everything. If we want to have a look at orders total or any other code we come up with at some stage, it didn't give me the page I wanted, but it's not giving me what I wanted there, but you get the idea. Oh, that was orders total. I meant to do orders send. That was the issue. So you get the same thing. It tells you all the different parameters that you can put within the brackets. So order sends an actual MQL4 code. And then you got all the variables and parameters that you need to put in inside the brackets. And that's what they are. You don't need all of them, but they're the ones you can use. And so if you come down here to the operation type, if you didn't know what that meant, you could click on trade operation. And these are the different trade operations that you can put in there. So you can do a buy or a sell, or you can do limit or buy stop orders as well. Anyway, that's it. That's this lesson number 2. Just trying to get through all the basics so far, but we'll probably start to get into actual, semi-complex coding from here on in though. All right, Aaron, thanks for jumping on. I'll put this recording up and everyone can watch it at their leisure.
Thanks for your help.
Too easy. I'll talk to you later, mate.